an honour agus privilege a bheith a láthair le bhniu ag an sarmana seo in rim fola. While an buíthas ó chrí a ggóil leis an Charlie Loughgall as an curú a bheith páirteach sa Comorú, in omós ar na lécra ón bhrigéid hírón ar a hit in 1987. Is mai slú mór a acail, blian in blian ag teach amach leis na huglaí seo chumhniu agus le takeíocht de hort den na Charlie Soccersa in Oireachtas. Friends, comrades and families of the Loughgall Martyrs, it is indeed a great honour and privilege to be here in your presence once again on this beautiful Baltanya Day in order to pay tribute and honour to the memories of the Brí of Óglaigh, Jim Lena, Padraig McKerney, Patrick Kelly, Declan Arthurs, Gerard O'Callaghan, Tony Gormley, Seamus Donnelly and Eugene Kelly. Thank you to the families and to the Memorial Committee for the invitation to join you on the 35th anniversary of the British state ambush of Óglaigh na HÉireann's finest and most committed soldiers in the village of Loughgall in County Ardwacha. This stunning and evocative memorial behind me stands as enduring testament to the esteem in which these heroes of the Republic are held among the people of Tyrone and Monaghan, and indeed in the hearts of anti-imperialists and freedom fighters throughout Ireland and across the world. So while I'm crew a horchanish, to Eamon Slip Hannah, Cahirlock of Tyrone National Graves, to offer us some background on this most fitting memorial to the Loughgall Martyrs. My darling wife, pulse of my heart, this is the end of all things earthly. Sentence of death has been passed. On 4:15 tomorrow, the sentence will be carried out by shooting. So must Irishmen pay for trying to make Ireland a free nation. These words of Michael Mallon, written to his wife as he awaited execution by the British on the 8th of May 1916, could just as easily have been written about the brave soldiers of the Irish Republic we commemorate today. These Tyrone Brigade IRA volunteers, Óglaigh Paddy Kelly, Óglaigh Declan Arthurs, Óglaigh Seamus Donnelly, Óglaigh Tony Gormley, Óglaigh Eugene Kelly, Óglaigh Jim Lena, Óglaigh Padraig McKerney, and Óglaigh Gerard O'Callaghan went out to strike a blow for Irish freedom. Civilian Auntie Cheese was also killed that day, and his brother Oliver was seriously injured. And I take this opportunity to express our continued sympathy and solidarity with the 9 bereaved families. Tyrone National Graves Association is honoured to be entrusted with maintaining this magnificent monument to 8 soldiers of the East Tyrone Brigade. We thank their families for putting their faith in the Tyrone National Graves Association, and a massive credit goes to all involved in creating this fine memorial behind us. We'd like to thank everyone that gave financial or labour help. East Tyrone has always led from the front and has took on the might of the British Crown Forces without fear. The bravery of the volunteers of the East Tyrone Brigade is legendary and has always been truly humbling to witness. The attack on these brave volunteers was part of the British mortar campaign in East Tyrone and North Armagh in the late 1980s and early 1990s, when the full might of the British war machine, including the SAS, the British Army, the RUC, the UVF and the UDR, were unleashed upon the people of East Tyrone. These men were husbands, fathers, sons, brothers, uncles, whose only crime that they were Irish in British occupied Ireland. They were respected and loved by their neighbours, friends and their whole communities. Indeed, these men were at home in areas across North Monaghan, East Tyrone and further afield. Contrast that with their faceless killers, nameless paid SAS assassins who were smuggled into Ireland in the dark of night to carry out Britain's war on terror against the democratic rights of the Irish people. This onslaught by Britain was to try and eradicate once and for all the spirit of freedom that lives so strongly in the hearts and minds of the Irish people. It has failed and it has failed miserably. Freedom continues to grow and flourish among the people. It is impervious to any weapon Britain holds in her arsenal. We salute you, Declan, Eugene, Jared, Jim, Paddy, Padraig, Seamus and Tony. Dear Shea Boss, our son, Naharan. We're Margaret.
Anish occurred Gale, the Ahasorum Falsha occur River Gid, Counterella, Garroge Macaig. Is a Garroge Dinya Dilla Charlie, a Willard Vass or Who's the Cantor Shaw. Cantor in a will and public tanas on a lodger. August ta Ihantus more or who as an Takiat, a hug shade lish and Kush public tanak or Futnam Lena. Garroge Macaig is a member of one of the best known and highly respected families in County Monaghan. Principal of Shani National School before his recent retirement, Garroge has always been uncompromising in his support for the cause of Republican Ireland. In keeping with his commitment to that cause, Garroge was one of the first to participate in building a monument at this location to commemorate and celebrate those who fell at Loughgall. From its first unveiling until it was shamefully demolished, Garroge presided over the annual commemoration, bringing to it the dignity, reverence and solemnity required. His contribution was deeply significant and greatly appreciated by the families, friends and comrades of the volunteers. There is no one more fitting, therefore, to unveil this new monument than our honoured guest, Anthroso Garroge Macaig.
Do you
want to cut the
You make sure the road way around. Up to the Garman theatre, but while I'm doing by weeks ago, while they're coming in in Washington, it's your own, as an Kurwa I live at Patrick, Moru Shocking you. Moru, the Octor del Scott, Ogly, a fall warrior, Loughgall. Been the jag is score here than you. I wasn't really intending to say anything. The hand was forced there. But before I cut the tape to officially unveil and open this monument on an official basis, I'd like to thank the Tyrone National Graves Association for the invitation to take part in this commemoration today. It's an honour and a privilege and a source of joy to be asked to participate at this memorial ceremony for these gallant volunteers of East Tyrone. I would just like to say, by way of tribute to a few people who were involved in this, but before that I would just say that hopefully this time, this monument will stand the test of time, and that it will be here along this road long after you and I and all of us here are gone to our eternal reward. And it will be a serve as a reminder to all the people who travelled north, south, south, north of the sacrifice that these men made and the part they played in the struggle for Irish freedom and independence. A freedom and independence that still eludes us. And sadly, I must say, it's a topic that we hear very, very little about nowadays, either in the walls of Leinster House or within the walls of Stormont. Freedom and independence seems to be a taboo subject. I would just like to pay a tribute to a small number of people. First of all, Mairead Kelly. Mairead Kelly is a tireless and unceasing worker on behalf of the families of the Loughgall Martyrs. She works tirelessly and relentlessly to attain justice and answers for the families. Many obstacles and roadblocks have been laid in her path, but it hasn't deterred her from seeking truth and justice. And I would just say to Mairead, Lanarai Lat Mairead, Birian is Rocky Lat, because the truth and justice will always triumph over lies and injustice. And finally, to the people who took up the mantle of the restoration of this monument following the destruction of the initial monument, I say to them, thank you very much. It's an edifice along this road, and you can be justifiably proud of your efforts. The finished product is beyond words. Now, Leis Gary May on tape agus fógrói mid oscailt effigiúil agus nochtú an lach cibnach an seo.
And now I would like to invite Cathal, please, to come up and give us a song.
Sung so many songs of fallen heroes. I really thought that I had said it all. What if a song can't fill our hearts and raise our spirits? And we'll sing about our martyrs at Loughgall. The Irish nation bowed its head in sorrow. Such sadness this country seldom known. For Monaghan had lost a gallant soldier and 7 volunteers from Green Tyrone. Oh, England, you really think it's over? If you do, you're gonna have to kill us all. For until you take your murderers out of Ireland, we will make you rue the blood spill at Loughgall. It was on a warm and misty Friday evening. The scent of apple blossom filled the air. That village street seemed quiet and deserted, but hidden eyes were watching everywhere. That digger bomb had only reached its target. The trap was sprung and gunfire filled the air. The SAS did not want any prisoners, for shoot to kill their orders were quite clear. Oh, England, you really think it's over? If you do, you're gonna have to kill us all. For until you take your murderers out of Ireland, we will make you rue the blood spill at Loughgall. They butchered 8 brave volunteers that evening. They were kicked and punched in case they were not dead. They dragged them off the turn at Armagh village, and they filled their bodies full of British lead. Did you think that it would teach us all a lesson? Such savagery, the whole world was appalled. Don't you know that there are 20 more lads waiting for everyone you butchered at Loughgall? Oh, England, you really think it's over? If you do, you're gonna have to kill us all. For until you take your murderers out of Ireland, we will make you rue the blood spill at Loughgall. So farewell, Paddy Kelly and Jelena. No more you'll need your fighting uniform. Side by side by Patrick McCartney and Tony Gormley, you died to drive the British from the north. Declan Arthurs and the youthful Seamus Stanley. On that night you were the youngest of them all, with Jerry O'Callaghan and the gallant Eugene Kelly. Your blood still stains the pavements at Loughgall. Oh England, you really think it's over? If you do, you're gonna have to kill us all. For until you take your murders out of Ireland, we will make you rue the blood spill at Loughgall. We will make you rue the blood spill at Loughgall. Thank you.
Give me the Weahas Cahill. Gabriel Kelly, brother of Loughgall Eugene Kelly, will now lower the flag of the Republic, while Helen Donnelly, sister of Loughgall Seamus Donnelly, will play a lament.
Monaghan Roll of Remembrance, volunteer Lawrence McKenna, all Republicans buried within these grounds. Tyrone Roll of Honour, volunteer Thomas Clark, volunteer Patrick Loughgall, volunteer Eddie McCusker, volunteer Patrick Morris, volunteer John O'Neill, volunteer James McNally, volunteer Thomas Gray, volunteer Frank Ward, volunteer Owen McGill, volunteer William Kearney, volunteer Bernard McCanny, volunteer William Dagley, volunteer Joe McKelvey, volunteer Sean McCahey, volunteer Sean Sharkey, volunteer John James Kelly, volunteer Charles McCafferty, volunteer Bernard Early, volunteer Hugh Ignatius Hearn, volunteer Tommy Gallagher, volunteer James McSorley, volunteer Daniel O'Doherty, volunteer John Devine, volunteer Charles Slevin, volunteer James Joseph Reynolds, volunteer Charlie Breslin, volunteer David Devine, volunteer Dennis Quinn, volunteer Hugh Hearn, volunteer John Patrick Mullen, volunteer Eugene Devlin, volunteer Kevin Kilpatrick, volunteer Sean Loughgall, volunteer Patrick Carty, volunteer Dermot Crowley, volunteer Jared McGlynn, volunteer Seamus Harvey, volunteer Dan McAnallen, volunteer Patsy Quinn, volunteer Desmond Morgan, volunteer Jim McGinn, volunteer Patrick MacDonald, volunteer Kevin Murray, volunteer Eugene Martin, volunteer Sean McKierney, volunteer Hugh Coney, volunteer Neil Lafferty, volunteer Paul Duffy, volunteer Martin Hurson, volunteer Brian Campbell, volunteer Colin McGirr, volunteer William Price, volunteer Michael Devine, volunteer Declan Arthurs, volunteer Seamus Donnelly, volunteer Tony Gormley, volunteer Eugene Kelly, volunteer Paddy Kelly, volunteer Jim Lina, volunteer Porrick McKierney, volunteer Jared O'Callaghan, volunteer Seamus Woods, volunteer Jared Hart, volunteer Martin Hart, volunteer Brian Mullen, volunteer James Joseph Conley, volunteer Liam Ryan, Volunteer Desi Grew. Volunteer Martin McCahey. Volunteer Noel Wilkinson. Volunteer Malcolm Nugent. Volunteer Dwayne O'Donnell. Volunteer John Quinn. Volunteer Tony Doris. Volunteer Lawrence McNally. Volunteer Pete Ryan. Volunteer Donny McCauley. Volunteer Sean O'Farrell. Volunteer Kevin Barry O'Donnell. Volunteer Patrick Vincent. Volunteer Peter Clancy. Na Fianna Erin, Fiann Tobias Malloy, Sinn Féin, Tommy Casey, Porrick O'Shanahan, Jeff McKenna.
Bawailam a ir orhuanish le bomachicunis avasu in omos erna hogli. Could I please call on you now to honour a minute's silence in respect of the names on the roll of honour. Gurmila Magad. Gabriel Kelly will now raise the national flag while Helen Donnelly once again plays a lament. I would now ask former Tyrone National Graves Chairperson Brian Colley, who oversaw the beginning of the process of erecting this glorious monument, to lead us in a decade of the Rosary. Brian is retiring after 25 years service with Tyrone National Graves. I would ask for that if you could give Brian, please, a bull of us.
and under the hall and tell them we're under our now. Shade of a we're at all on the grass, the town cheering a lot, the Spanish who them around, the Spanish door to families. Shade of a we're at all on the grass, the town cheering a lot, the Spanish who them around, the Spanish door to families. Shade of a we're at all on the grass, the town cheering a lot, the Spanish who them around, the Spanish door to families. Shade of a we're at all on the grass, the town cheering a lot, the Spanish who them around, the Spanish door to families. Shade of a we're at all on the grass, the town cheering a lot, the Spanish who them around, the Spanish door to families. Shade of a we're at all on the grass, the town cheering a lot, the Spanish who them around, the Spanish door to families. Shade of a we're at all on the grass, the town cheering a lot, the Spanish who them around, the Spanish door to families. Shade of a we're at all on the grass, the town cheering a lot, the Spanish who them around, the Spanish door to families. Shade of a we're at all on the grass, the town cheering a lot, the Spanish who them around, the Spanish door to families. Shade of a we're at all on the grass, the town cheering a lot, the Spanish who them around, the Spanish door to families. Glory to the Nahar and the Wackers and Spirit Name and Tarnish and Goose Mirage, Dale and Sail Name, and I'm an Nahar and Big Spirit Name.
I shall now call on friend and comrade Margaret McKerney to lay the first wreath on behalf of the Army. I would now call on a representative from each of the families of the 8 volunteers to lay a lily at the stone of each of the volunteers simultaneously, please. Years ago, the brave volunteers of Oakley Naharan stood shoulder to shoulder against the British Empire in Loughgall. Today, their families remain shoulder to shoulder, unbowed and unbeaten in that opposition, and pledge their commitment to the establishment of the Irish Republic. Could I now ask representative, please, Rory Boyce from Common Uina Lake Regale, the National Graves Association, to lay the next wreath. I call on Martin Mullen from Tyrone National Graves to lay a wreath. Oisín Loughgall on behalf of the 1916 Societies to Larry. And then could I call on any other wreaths, please? Could I now call on Sean O'Lynshey, nephew of Loughgall McKerney, to recite a poem, The Memory of the Dead by John Kells Ingram. While the poem was written back in 1843, it was still as significant in 1987 as indeed it is today.
Who fears to speak of 87, who blushes at the name? When cowards mock the patriot's fate, who hangs their head for shame? He's all a knave or half a slave, who slights his country thus, but a true man like you, man, will fill your glass with us. We drink the memory of the brave, the faithful and the few. Some lie far off beyond the wave, some sleep in Ireland too. All are gone, but still live on the fame of those who died. All true men, like you men, remember them with pride. Some on the shores of distant lands their weary hearts have laid, and by the stranger's heedless hands their lonely graves were made. But though their clay be far away, beyond the Atlantic foam, in true men like you men, their spirits still at home. The dust of some is Irish earth, among their own they rest, and that same land that gave them birth has caught them to their breast. And we will pray that from their clay full many a race may start, of true men like you men, to act as brave a part. They rose in dark and evil days to right their native land. They kindled here a living blaze that nothing shall withstand. Alas, that might can vanquish right, they fell and passed away. But true men like you men are plenty here today. Then here's their memory. May it be for us a guiding light, to cheer our strife for liberty and teach us to unite. Through good and ill be Ireland still, though sad as theirs your fate. And true men like you men, like those of 87.
Galanta Kiankirk Magus. Anish a Carjigale, Bagralam Curru Horch done Friu Kaincher and you, James Kearney. Our main speaker today, James Tierney, is one of the staunchest Irish Republicans we have in our country today. Born and reared here in County Monaghan, and while still a teenager, James joined Loughgall Heron and threw himself wholeheartedly into the struggle for a sovereign, independent Irish Republic. While on active service with his late comrade Seamus McElwain and Marcus Murray, James was captured by the Crown forces and sentenced to many years in the long Kesh H blocks. While imprisoned, he made his position clear. When presented with the choice between a drift towards centrist nationalism and progressive republicanism, James stood and has continued to stand with the Republican policies of James Connolly and Tom Clark. We are honoured to have as our main speaker today, James Tierney.
Cobran a Yanu, the Clana, the Loughgall, a Fear Boss, Loughgall, August Falshire, or Curve, and Clock, Cuiva Mackin, Nua, then Kate, Scott, Ata, Hogu, and Shaw. May I begin by offering my sympathy to the families of our heroic volunteers commemorated through this splendid new monument. May I also congratulate all those who have contributed to bringing this tremendous project to fruition. Friends, comrades, Irish Republicans, we have gathered here today in celebration. We are here to celebrate the lives, the patriotism, the contribution and the sacrifice of 8 heroic volunteers. We are here to unveil this monument to remember without fear the integrity of those men, those gallant soldiers of the Irish Republican Army, deserve our enduring respect for the ideals they stood for and the courage in carrying those ideals through. Permit me to speak their names, the names of the glorious fallen: Patrick Kelly, Jim Lynagh, Gerard O'Callaghan, Padraig McKerney, Eugene Kelly, Declan Arthurs, Tony Gormley, Seamus Donnelly. Let me say this of these men: they were guerrilla fighters, they were selfless patriots, they were dedicated revolutionaries, and above all they were committed to the cause they served, heedless of the risk involved and the danger they knew they faced. Not for them the mercenaries' greed for payment, not for them the selfless consideration of career advancement, not for them the prospect of high and comfortable office. These men gave willingly of their time and talents, without any thought of financial reward. They were unwilling to make the compromising twists and turns demanded of the obsequious, self-serving place men and place women. No, these men of an absolute establishment of an All-Ireland Republic, modelled on the thinking of the great vision of James Connolly, a man with his ancestral home in this very county of Monaghan, in keeping with the clearly stated objectives of the organisation to which they belonged, their inspiration, indeed their only goal, was the establishment of a 32-county socialist republic. On a day such as this, quite literally hours after the counting has been completed for the 6th County Assembly, it is important that we consider where we stand now in relation to achieving the objectives commemorating this afternoon. By any standard, we have a journey to travel before we can claim to have achieved the cause for which these men gave their lives. We still have a partitioned Ireland, and after all, we are only standing yards away from that undemocratic imposition by Britain on the people of this country. The conditions under which so many of our people are forced to live are distressing and unacceptable. Dystopian era yielded by manipulating corporations where privacy, health, data,
education, housing is but a moving chess piece, and we are the pawns. In both regimes, on either side of the border, the British created border, there is a health service and a health provision crisis. In the 6 counties, the much vaunted National Health Service is in crisis, as the least well off are now being forced to either pay for health provision or endure insufferably lengthy periods waiting for care, and in some cases access tragically comes too late. In the 26 counties, the situation is equally intolerable, where a two-tier health service delivers adequate care only for those who can afford it. This is a shameful and disgraceful commentary on any society. There is the cruel situation in relation to housing, and to be more accurate, lack of housing. Although frequently highlighted with little impact on the governing politicians, the issue also impacts on too many unfortunate people in the northern 6 counties. Sadly, I could continue to detail the plight of too many people living on this island. There are many other issues underlying the inequality brought about and underpinned by the events of a century ago that led to the creation of 2 failed states in this country. The 2 failed states that continue to remain in place. In light of this disheartening commentary on the nature of Irish society today, there are some who may be tempted to ask whether the sacrifice of the noble late, and indeed that of all other martyr dead, notwithstanding what remains to be accomplished. These men were born into a 6-county Orange state, in which the Orange Order and its creation, the Unionist Party, exercised unchallenged political, economic and security control. For 50 years, this regime appeared immutable, and through the use of political violence had effectively intimidated almost all resistance to its authority. Thanks to the remarkable heroism, dedication and bravery of these outstanding volunteers of Loughgall and Ahern and all their other gallant comrades, they smashed for all time the ability of the Orange Unionism, supported by its imperial master in London, to govern Ireland with impunity. They smashed forever the myth of Orange might and British power. They also ended forever the false claim of Irish republicanism, behind which the 26 county ruling class has hidden for decades. In place of all this, we have a new balance of power in the north and changing circumstances in the south. That is not to say, let me emphasise, that we have achieved an acceptable resolution. We have not. But as a consequence of the gallantry and sacrifice of the heroic 8 and their comrades, they have advanced the struggle for a workers' republic towards its ultimate realisation. It now falls to the current generation of socialist republicans to draw inspiration from the heroes that we are celebrating here today. To draw inspiration and pay them the only and proper worthy tribute that can be paid to our fallen martyrs. That is to work day and night to complete the task they set themselves and to carry their and our cause to the victory for which they shed their blood. On to the Republic for which they gave their lives. Thank you.
James, and our proceedings are shortly coming to a close, and I can assure you that our young comrade is coming round a little bit again. Okay, Okay, before we conclude, just a couple of short announcements. At 4 p.m. there will be a march from Galbally to Kappa to remember the Loughgall Martyrs at 4 p.m. today. And tomorrow will be Owen McGill's anniversary in Donaghmore at 7:30 p.m. with wreath laying after. Okay, Carja, just while I'm buíhas a go and live good year, as chat to you, thank you all for coming to this wonderful ceremony today. And we shall now conclude proceedings by asking Kevin McGillivreeja to give us Oron Nevian. Okay, while we're waiting for Kevin to join us, I've been asked to make another announcement. At 12 o'clock on the 26th of June, there'll be a walk for the volunteers beginning at the Seamus McElwain Monument and going over Slieve Bay. Slight change. Okay, but I'm sure it'll be able to. Gurmina Maga the Carja.